Well, that sort of money comes from the savings that are to be achieved by getting out of this dreadful franchising system that leaks so much money out of the system. We can bring that to an end, then we've got a fund available to deliver those sorts of cuts. And there's something in the order of 1.2 billion going out of the system on an annual basis.
But you say that. I mean, I'm looking at the profits that are made by those train operating companies. It's not a particularly profitable business, actually. I mean, their total profits, 222 million in 2014-15. Total passenger revenue is getting on for 9 billion. You're talking about one is diddly squat and one is a very large number.
These are the dividends that are paid out on an annual basis. But those savings, if those operating costs are removed by having so many operators in the system, we've got a ridiculous multiplicity of providers in our country. There's so many players in the railway system that costs escalate ridiculously.
You're going to have a Western Railway and a West Coast and an East Coast. You're going to have a Southern. They're still going to be there, aren't they, in your system or our system?
Well, that's right. But at the moment, what we have is a subsidy system that's going straight into these companies and often to countries to Germany, to France, to Abellio, to all across the European...
We are subsidising some of them and we make money from some of them. But the truth is the profits, which are the bit that leak out, are approximately 2.5% of the passenger revenues. You can't cut fares by 10%, no. Even if you removed every bit of profit and you assume that you were just as efficient as they are, you've still got 7.5% to find.
But the research that the TUC have conducted shows that anywhere up to 600 million can be taken out of the system on an annual basis by the change from franchises to directly operated railways. And look what happened with East Coast. £1 billion was returned to the Treasury over the duration of that franchise.
Right.
A very successful
franchise. Report makes estimates of these interface costs, the cost of dealing, one company having to deal with another and work out whose fault it was that the train was late. They're quoting the McNulty report when they do that. The McNulty report looked at costs in the railways. McNulty said much more can be gained by improving the performance of the current system rather than embarking on a costly programme of renationalisation, which is unlikely to lead to an overall reduction in costs. So McNulty doesn't think there's a big cost saving to be found by renationalisation.
But it isn't an expensive process if you're just allowing franchises to get to their natural termination point and not be renewed. There's no acquisition costs involved in the process if they're just falling one after another. What we're doing is saving ourselves a fortune over the term.
You would agree, though, that this comprises a top-down reorganisation of the railways, or not? Is it or isn't it?
Well, I mean, you might want to describe it that way, but because it's phased, because you've got franchises regularly coming up for review and renewal, it's a graduated process.
So it's a gradual top-down reorganisation.
Well, absolutely right. But, you know, why can't we have the confidence in this country to do what's done in Germany with Deutsche Bahn and Keolis in France and Nederlandse Spoorwegen in Holland? They're quite content to have their infrastructure and their operators being state-owned control. And they are here in this country extracting that value and taking it back over there.
They're taking out a tiny proportion of the value. They're taking out 2.5% of the passenger revenue.
2.5% of a lot of money is a lot of money.
But the basic fact is that the 10% figure, the 10% cut in rail fares, is reliant on making hundreds of millions of pounds of savings, which the guy whose estimate of the savings you're quoting does not believe are there to be made.
Well, you've got different commentators coming up with different figures.
Well, you're quoting the TUC, who quote another group who are quoting McNulty, and McNulty says you cannot make those savings.
Well, I just respectfully disagree. When you've got a whole raft of people getting... you've got people to pay people at Southern who are sitting there getting millions of pounds by way of salaries and bonuses for running the most appalling service. We hand over 1.1 billion to that company, and it doesn't matter what happens in terms of the service they provide, they get paid hail or shine, and that just is simply unacceptable.
But actually, in that respect, you make a very interesting point, because isn't the truth of it, this railway system in our country is government-controlled already. Network Rail, basically part of the public sector. Southern is... The government gets all the revenue from the passengers in the case of that Southern franchise. It instructs Southern how to manage the service. It has told Southern to stick to its rules on driver operation and to hold out against the unions. It is a government-operated rail service. Southern, the company, is just simply doing its bidding at the hands of the company. It is a public ownership of the railway.
Well, not at all, because they're given that money whether they perform well or indifferently. As we have seen, they've just taken 341 trains off a day. And what sort of service
at the government's instruction. That's a government decision, not a Southern decision.
Well, if that's the case, then the government should be intervening and saying, for goodness sake, get this thing back in order. Let's get away with this crisis and this discussion about driver-only operation, because it is a distraction.
You want politicians and government to have more say in the railways. Now, clearly, you don't want the Conservative government to have more say in the railways because you say they don't run Southern very well. Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonald, your team, if you run the railways, will you run it better than you run the Labour Party?
Well, it's not a matter of the Labour Party running the railways. It's the rail experts that we've got in this country having the freedom to do what was done by directly operated railways between 2009, 2014, and look at the success that they made of that East Coast service. The highest rate of customer satisfaction, good industrial relations, a very successful service. So it's freeing us up from this rigour of trying to produce dividends and profits to third parties and foreign state-owned controlled companies.
Final question, because some will say this is all ideological. Do you believe BT should be brought back into public ownership as well?
Oh, that's not my view.
Do you think it was right to privatise it?
Well, in the fullness of time, I think all of these services can be looked at, quite frankly. I mean, why is it, for example, that we're looking at 6 companies providing energy when what people want out of this system is reliable energy as cheap as possible? They don't want to be in competitions and trying to switch providers from time to time. They simply want to have a good service, reliable and affordable. And at the moment, those things don't exist.
We've opened up a very big can of worms there. Andy McDonald, thank you very much. Thank you.